Good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? Oh, good, you're alive. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us for today's program, Killer Lawns, a Perfect Earth Project Grounded Conversation. My name is Anthony Madonna. I am the theater director and curator of performing arts here at Guildhall. Core to Guildhall's founding mission is to encourage a greater civic participation. Since 1931, we've served this mission through building empathetic understandings through the presentation of performing and visual arts, and by platforming thought leaders, from authors and politicians, scientists and environmentalists who push us to think differently. So we are so happy to be partnering with Perfect Earth Project today for this program, and I hope it'll bring up new questions and thoughts for you all. Now, please welcome the founder and president of Perfect Earth Project and Guildhall Academy of the Arts member, Edwina von Gal, to tell you more about the program and introduce today's panel. Thank you all.
Hi, everybody. Okay, here we go. Thank you all for showing up. I'm so glad you're here. And of course, thank you to Guildhall for making this incredible space available to us and our wonderful community, because it's so great that they kept just the right amount and they did all this wonderful work to it. So Perfect Earth, in case that you don't know, is dedicated to helping people help themselves, their pets, and the planet towards a healthier and happier future. We focus on our relationships to our lands, how to manage them for maximum conditions conducive to life. We do this by educating people about what's actually going on in their landscapes, which is usually bad news. So conventional landscapes are a system dependency, dependence on noise and poisons, highly lucrative. It's a downward cycle of suppressing life instead of celebrating it. Suffolk County has the highest level of pesticide use in New York State. And throughout the United States, about 80 million pounds of pesticides are applied to residential landscapes every single year. So, and why are we making this about lawns? Because most of that is actually concentrated on lawns. And pesticides are seriously bad news for our health, which is what you're going to learn about today, and our longevity, and more bad news. But we follow that with the good news, because actually the alternative is filled with joy and beauty, and Perfect Earth is here to help you negotiate the process. So nature-based ecological land care, so much more fun, more interesting, and filled with physical and psychological health benefits. Grounded conversations like this one are one of the ways that Perfect Earth engages our audience through thought-provoking, solutions-based discussions with super smart and interesting people. So welcome. Helping us get in touch with the fact that we were once all wild beings. What have we lost? A lot. So each of our smart and interesting experts will give you some insight into their knowledge and perspectives, and we will discuss the issues and then answer the questions that come up between us, and then we will ask you to write all this time. You're writing your questions down on your cards, I hope, and then we'll ask you to pass them up front, and we will answer them. After that, we're going to head to the garden, where you can pick up your book and get your book signed and talk individually. So we hope you keep your questions on the cards to kind of general interest, things that would be relevant to the entire audience, and then you can speak about maybe personal health questions or issues directly with the experts afterwards. And Perfect Earth will be there in the garden as well to talk to you personally about your relationship to your land. So first of all, Dr. Ray Dorsey. Ray has a long, long list of credentials, papers published, honors bestowed. He is now with Atria Health and Research Institute. He's a practicing neurologist and a director of the Center for the Brain and the Environment, which is a nonprofit research initiative that will investigate the environmental causes of Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, and much more. His approach is especially interesting to us because he's combining technology with real world, real people issues and solutions. This is how he ended up here talking about lawn chemicals. Because preceded by years of word of mouth from my friends, the songbirds in Palm Beach, I've been hearing about this amazing man, Dr. Ray Dorsey, and how I had to meet him. And thanks to the Southampton Parkinson Center who brought him here, I got to meet him, and we instantly sort of said, oh my gosh, this is a conversation we need to keep on having. So here he is, and I think you will find that his passion and eloquence are definitely contagious.
Thank you, Edwina. Thank you very much for Project Earth. It's wonderful to be with all of you this evening. In 1991, a woman in Simi Valley outside of Los Angeles wrote a note. And the note read, in 1991, a woman in Simi Valley outside of Los Angeles wrote a note. And the note said, the National Cancer Institute annual budget is $1.8 billion. Only 5% goes to cancer prevention. Help us wake up legislators and America by wearing this ribbon. Charlotte Haley knew something was wrong because her sister and her daughter had both had breast cancer. And just in her lifetime, breast cancer had gone in 1960 to affecting 1 in 20 women to now affecting 1 in 8 women. And she wanted to know why, and she wanted to know what we could do to prevent people from getting breast cancer. So she appended that note to a peach ribbon, and she handed them out in doctors' offices. She mailed them to first ladies. She handed them out in Ralph's grocery stores, and the ribbons were catching on, so much so that she ended up distributing 40,000 of them. Her husband even worked extra hours to pay for the extra ribbon, postage, and notes. Eventually, a magazine and a cosmetics company learned about her work and approached her and said, hey, we would like to put this out in our magazine and in our cosmetics. And she said, no. She said, I don't want anyone making money off the suffering of my daughter and my sister. I've seen enough of that. The company then consulted their attorney, and they concluded they couldn't use the peach ribbon, but if they changed the color to pink, that would be fine. So we've transformed focus of this has had 2 major consequences. One is we've moved from a woman who is deeply affected by breast cancer to the voice being that of a cosmetics company whose products, some of which have been linked to breast cancer. And the second is we've moved from a focus on prevention, which is what Ms. Charlotte Haley wanted to focus on, to one focused on early detection. Prevention to early detection. Why? What's the significance of that? I think there's 2. One, prevention provides huge benefits to all of us. We're at lower risk for getting the disease. Early detection is important too. Early detection, though, has lots of stakeholders who benefit financially from that. So if you're getting mammograms, doctors are making money off those mammograms. The people who manufacture mammograms are making money. Undoubtedly, it's going to detect cancers earlier, which is good. Might even generate more members, more donors to a foundation. These early detections might lead to surgeries, which is beneficial to surgeons and to hospitals. It might lead to radiation, which is beneficial for radiation oncologists and companies that make the machines. It might lead to chemotherapy, which is good for oncologists and for pharmaceutical companies, and it might lead to hormone antagonists, which is, again, good for pharmaceutical companies. So that's one thing. We've moved from something with benefiting all of us to something that's clearly benefiting stakeholders in the process. The second is that we've moved to early detection, which begs for better and better treatments and never stops to ask, why are so many women getting breast cancer? Indeed, today, if I asked you what causes breast cancer, I'd probably get this pause. Only about 10% of breast cancer is due to genetic mutations in BRCA1 and BRCA2. The rest has largely not been well defined. Endocrine disrupting compounds, as we'll hear about shortly, might be playing a role. So against this backdrop, I've been doing a listening tour tied to our new book on Parkinson's disease, which argues that chemicals in our environment are largely responsible for transforming what was once a rare disease when Dr. Parkinson described it in 1817. He said, I'm describing a condition that's not been described in the medical literature, and he described 6 individuals with this disease of a shuffling gait, a stooped posture, and a shaking hand. 200 years later, over 6 million people have the disease. It went from something not described in the medical literature to the world's fastest growing brain disease in just 2 centuries. Why? As part of our book, we've been doing a nationwide listening tour, and it took me to Tallahassee, Florida. And there in Tallahassee, Florida, I was in an Uber, and I was going to speak at this community center. And before I was entering this community center, there was a bright green lawn. And on that bright green lawn in Tallahassee was a sign for the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. I smirked to myself, thinking that many pesticides or endocrine disrupting compounds, they mimic the effects of estrogen. Unopposed estrogen is one of the major risk factors for breast cancer. I then also thought to myself, many of these pesticides, certain of these pesticides have been linked to Parkinson's disease. Many pesticides work by by damaging the nervous system of insects. Shouldn't be terribly surprising that a chemical that damages the nervous system of insects might damage the nervous system of human beings. And with that, I then read about Carl's work highlighting how these chemicals are also affecting the health of not just humans, but as non-human animals, I think you would probably say, of non-human animals, other than human animals. And so I have come to the conclusion that we have a great chance to prevent diseases, and that's why I recently moved from an academic position at the University of Rochester to join an organization in New York City called the Atria Health and Research Institute, whose mission is to move from reactive sick care to proactive preventive care, so we can prevent people like Charlotte Haley and like all of you from ever getting breast cancer, and prevent all of you from getting brain diseases like Parkinson's.
Thank you, Ray. That was great. And now, let's see. Is it Carl next?
No, we'll see whose slides.
Let's see whose slides. Okay, well, let's say it's you, Carl.
Okay.
And so Carl is an ecologist, a writer,
Can I have that clip?
and an all-around champion of life on Earth. And I guess you could say other than human life on Earth.
Yes.
He has a harder time with humans. We all of us in the plant and animal world, we kind of do. Carl's received like a multitude of awards. He got a MacArthur grant and lots of accolades, and he's the founder and president of the Safina Center, which promotes disruptive, loving ideas for fostering a better future. And he's now the very first endowed professor for nature and humanity at Stony Brook University. Carl speaks for the world that most of us are not hearing. The much larger population of life forms that are not human and which we are harming without knowing it or the consequences of doing so. In the many books he has written, my favorite is still The View from Lazy Point, because he always comes back to his dog. But Lazy Point is about a place I know, and I'm a place-based kind of girl. So, but all of his books come back to this voice of the non-human world. Many of them are about exotic and endangered lives all around the world, but then they're very compelling, but they always come back to his love for his dog. and
Okay.
They do. And also his love is apparent for this community because you're always here for us. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. That was very sweet. Thank you. I just have a few words to say, and pretty informal, but I'll tell you just a couple of little anecdote-type stories. Once when I was an adolescent, I was coming home from, I guess, probably junior high school, and I was just coming home from the school bus, and somebody was spraying trees. You've all seen people spraying trees, and bugs were dropping out of the trees that were just being sprayed, and there were some robins running around in the street eating the bugs and going into convulsions and dying right there in front of me as I was walking home from school. That left a big impression. There was a famous popular book out at the time called Silent Spring, Rachel Carson's epic-making book, Silent Spring, and I thought I should read about some of this stuff. And so I got the book, and in the back seat of my parents' car, I started reading it. I got, 20 pages in as we were on our way to visit my aunt or something. And I got physically very nauseous. I thought I was going to throw up in the car. It was incredibly upsetting to me that we were just poisoning everything and everybody around us. And I couldn't pick that book up again until I was a senior in college. I finally read the book. But by then I kind of had known a lot of stuff that is in the book. When I was 15, somebody took me fishing at their secret pond in Flanders. And across the pond, there was a gigantic stick nest that was empty. I knew from things I had read that was an osprey nest, but there were no ospreys. It's very hard. I mean, the people in this room may remember. It's kind of hard to remember a time when there were no ospreys. They were erased from the entire eastern seaboard except for a small handful hanging on in Chesapeake Bay. I used to go fishing every weekend. I still do. And I saw my first osprey in 1970, and I saw my second osprey in 1976. And today I probably saw 20 of them on the way out here. And that difference was because DDT was banned in 1972, and they went on a multi-decadal slow increase from there. So I decided my father had basically none of these concerns. He was extremely happy to have moved from Brooklyn to the suburbs. Everybody had the suburban dream. He certainly had it. And he learned early how to be a good suburbanite. He did everything to his lawn. We had an edger. We had all the pesticides. Everything that is banned now, we had. I remember one day he made me help him against my will, because by then I was very uncomfortable with any of this stuff. And I just knew that I wanted a different relationship with myself, my property, where I lived, the whole rest of the world. And I just never have used pesticides, and I never used fertilizers. I was hoping to show you a few slides. They're not here right now. I don't know what happened to them. But, am I supposed to advance it? Okay. Oh, there we go. So this is a very good friend of mine. Her name is Alfie. She is an 8-year-old screech owl that we raised from a dying chick that somebody found on their lawn. And this was her just a couple of weeks ago. She's incubating what should be, there we go, good. Okay, she's incubating these 5 eggs. Now, and they just hatched yesterday, which I brought pictures, and they couldn't get the pictures in the slideshow in time. But what I wanted to say is that every single bird that you see has hatched from eggs. We don't see the eggs because they're hiding, but these are our neighbors. And in my backyard, we have these owls. She's 8 years old right now. We have turkeys. We have deer. We have ticks, which I should say something about protecting ourselves from ticks. But I don't do it with spraying poison all over everything. Edwina mentioned to me that the eagle nest that got established in Montauk a few years ago, the following year one of the eagles died, and it was analyzed. It was full of rat poison. Flacco, the famous owl in Central Park, was full of rat poison. These are my neighbors, these owls. And when the house next door to me sold, I discovered a box of rat poison next to their shed. I didn't want my neighbors to poison my owls. I don't want to poison my friends, my neighbors, all the birds that are here. So I just have a very different kind of relationship with my home, which is I'm not at war with where I live. I'm not like my father was, trying to kill everything and make everything stand up straight. If you came to my house, you'd see a nice kind of a scruffy place. The lawn is sometimes mowed. It's not mowed in May. We stopped mowing in May. There's this thing, no mow May. We stopped mowing in May a few years ago. It gets kind of scruffy looking, but in July, we have tremendous numbers of fireflies, lightning bugs in the yard. It's really glorious. Right now we have all the dogwoods in the backyard in bloom, and it's just a beautiful place. And it's a place that's safe for all my other than human neighbors. So I long ago just decided I was going to make peace with where I live, and that's the way I carry on. Now, I don't want to forget about ticks, because ticks are really dangerous. I've had Lyme disease. Probably a few of you have had Lyme disease. But the answer to that is not to kill everything and then get ticks anyway, because spraying a yard is no guarantee that you'll have no ticks in the yard. So what I do is, if I'm going to go out and do gardening and stuff like that, I just put the clothes on that I'm going to use for gardening, and I spray them. And I spray my legs, my boots, my sleeves, spray my hat, and then when I'm done, I take those clothes off, I go take a shower, and I put different clothes on. I have found that is just about 100% effective for preventing tick bites and preventing most ticks from even getting on you. A lot of people like permethrin infused clothing. That works very well when it's new. It does work very well. I've tested it out. I let a tick get on my pants, started climbing up, got overcome by whatever the fumes are from the permethrin, and it fell off. But it's the point of contact that is where I protect myself from ticks. Also, not everybody likes deer eating everything, and deer eat a lot of things we don't want them to eat. My solution to that is to fence the things that I don't want the deer to eat, which in my case is just my vegetable garden, really. The other stuff, they eat what they want to eat. They don't eat what they don't want to eat. There's plenty of stuff you can plant that's deer resistant, and more or less that's what I have to say to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Carl. And okay, Dr. Sarah Evans. So Sarah's an associate professor in the Department of Environmental Medicine at Mount Sinai and a member of the Institute for Exposomic, keep that word in mind, you're going to hear it, exposomic research at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Her research is focused on the impacts of early life environmental exposures on nervous system development and child behavior. Sarah's been in the Perfect Earth biome for quite some time. She's always been wonderfully generous with her dedication, and her dedication to research that can prove ultimately, we're all working on this, that ultimately we can prove that pesticides are harming our children, and she can make solid suggestions about what we can all do about it, because why take a chance? Even if you're not sure, why take a chance? She's been consistently generous with her time and expertise for events like this, and always brings something new to our message.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit to share some of the data that we have that's coming out of Mount Sinai and similar institutions related to the impact of pesticides on children's health and the work that our team is doing, not only at our research institute, but also with our pediatric environmental health specialists at Mount Sinai and across New York State. And just to say that we've received federal funding and also state funding to do this work, but I have no conflicts of interest, and that's something that I need to say. So at Mount Sinai, we're doing research into how early life exposures influence health and disease across the lifespan, but we're really committed to bringing that research into the clinic, out to communities like this, and also to change policy and practice through evidence-based decisions. So the work that we do, both in research and clinically, and I think why we're all here today, is really driven by the fact that chronic diseases are on the rise. And many common diseases, you already heard about some from Ray, in terms of Parkinson's disease, types of cancers, have been increasing across the past few decades in ways that cannot be explained by genetics alone. And when we sort of dig deep into each of these, we find that they all have some environmental component. And so that's how we're approaching this at the Institute for Exposomics Research, as Edwina mentioned. And this is to really look holistically at all of the factors that we're exposed to, even from before conception, throughout fetal development, early childhood, and into older age. So we don't really think about one chemical at a time anymore, and I think that's really important when we're thinking about what we put on our lawns and gardens, that it's not just that one insecticide that we're exposed to. We're exposed to really kind of a toxic soup of chemicals, and how do we study all of those and think about how they impact our health? So how we do that, in many of our studies, we enroll people during pregnancy or even before conception, and we look in their bodies to see what they're exposed to. We have cutting-edge research where we can look in teeth. I was talking to Ray about this. In fact, we look in baby teeth and also in adult teeth post-mortem to see what exposures occurred across the lifespan and try to identify them. We're looking at wearable devices. We're looking at mapping, all to get a holistic idea of what we're exposed to. And so what do we find? We find that we're exposed to hundreds of chemicals on a regular basis, often at low levels, but for many, many years. More than 40 of the pesticides that have been identified in the body by the CDC are characterized as pesticides, and many of those are higher in children, and that's what we're really concerned about. Also higher in communities of color. So why are they higher in children? If you have children, if you're around children, I think you know that they're closer to the ground. They roll around in the ground. They put their hands in their mouths and other objects. They actually breathe faster than adults. So when you spray something, they're more likely to inhale more of that chemical. And they eat a less varied diet. So if we're thinking about pesticides, often, unfortunately, children love strawberries. They love apples. Some of those foods that we find have actually higher pesticide residues. And so across the lifespan, our studies have identified windows of susceptibility where if you're exposed to a pesticide chemical or other types of chemicals, you're more likely to experience harm. And that applies in many cases to the developing brain and the reproductive system, which develop actually well into adulthood as well. So these are times where we're more vulnerable to exposures to these chemicals, which we're also experiencing more during childhood. Pesticide applicators are also at risk, so when you're having conversations with your landscapers, and I think Perfect Earth can help you with these conversations, they are really at a much higher risk, and their children are at higher risk. And so we know from many studies of agricultural workers in California and other places in the country that their children are also more likely to experience harms from pesticide exposures just from their parents working out in the fields. So just because it's on the shelf does not necessarily mean it's safe. And Edwina already talked about the huge billions of pounds of pesticides that are applied across the country. And just to add to that, I've listed some of the most common pesticide chemicals that are applied in agriculture and in our homes and gardens. And you can see that many of them are associated with harm to the nervous system, as well as cancers, hormone disruption. And you can see what Edwina mentioned before in data from New York State, Suffolk County being the darkest color on this map because you all experience the highest concentrations of pesticide applications in the state. This is the data that's reported to the state. Across the country, the pesticide industry is just growing and expected to hit $28 billion by 2031. So I already mentioned we really worry a lot about impaired brain development, and you heard some of that from Ray, as well as cancer. But essentially, pesticides have been shown to be associated with pretty much every adverse health outcome you can imagine. And this is just to show, we've shifted. I think we mentioned DDT today. We might have mentioned some of these other classes of pesticides, pyrethroids. All of these pesticide chemicals that target insects interfere with the nervous system in some way. And I've just drawn two neurons here talking to each other in different ways that these chemicals, which are designed to kill pests by interfering with their nervous systems, also interfere with our nervous system. So there's a biological mechanism for that, and there are a number of studies. I just listed a few here, some of the stronger studies showing how pesticides interfere with IQ, with child brain development, and even with changes in brain structure and function. And as we've replaced some of the more harmful pesticide chemicals like organochlorines, like chlorpyrifos and organophosphate, with pyrethroids, we're finding that they all have similar adverse health outcomes in children's brains. Similarly, some of the data related to childhood cancers, and we can talk more about some of these in the Q&A, but people who report applying pesticides in their homes during pregnancy are more likely to have a child who has a childhood leukemia, and I mentioned some of the farm worker studies as well. So what can we do? And I think that's what, I think Edwina can lead a conversation about the types of interventions that we can take. Of course, we can individually change our behavior, but it's also really important for us to influence the marketplace and influence landscapers to stop using these, influence our neighbors to stop using these chemicals, and we need stronger regulations at the policy level. So we can talk more about these as well. So in addition to supporting organizations like Perfect Earth and finding strategies to stop using pesticide chemicals on your properties, doing things like taking off your shoes, eliminating dust in the home, sealing up cracks and crevices inside so you don't have to use pesticide chemicals indoors, all of these things have been proven to reduce your exposure. And at Mount Sinai, we're educating clinicians. So if you go to your physician today, unless it's Dr. Dorsey, probably they're not going to have a lot of advice on pesticide chemicals. They're not going to be up on this literature. They're not going to know what to tell you. But at Mount Sinai, we're really fortunate that we have a network of clinicians who are doing this work through programs like we have a prescription for prevention program, and there's a pediatric environmental childhood cancer in the environment program. So we're working on getting this information into the hands of all of your doctors so that they know how to advise you on reducing these types of exposures. Similarly, we worked closely with New York City on a synthetic pesticide ban in New York City parks, and we supported the neonicotinoids ban in the state of New York. And so, just to maybe leave this off on a positive note, U.S. organic sales have increased in the last several years. We're seeing more and more state and municipal level bans. We know that a lot of the newer pesticide chemicals, even though I said that they are harmful in similar ways that some of the older ones were, they leave the body faster. So by making changes today, you can reduce your body burden of exposure to many of them much more quickly. And then I think the thing that is really important for us to talk about and learn from Edwina and from Carl is that these effective organic landscaping practices exist. You can live with your weeds. You can have beautiful properties without using synthetic pesticide chemicals. And I just want to give a plug. If you want to get more information about the work that we do, you can scan the QR code. You can just look us up at Mount Sinai, Exposomics. And this will also take you to more information. And I only went over a little bit, so that's, do I close this out or?
That was great. Thank you. Okay, now we have some questions here. So this is what everybody gets asked all the time. So each of you can take a shot at this one if you wish. I know Ray has statistics because this is when when people are resisting this message, they say to me, well, if these pesticides are so bad, and why don't all golfers have it? Like, why doesn't everybody with a bad lung, with a toxic lung, why doesn't everybody have these diseases?
So my colleague, Dr. 2005 last year showed that people who live within a mile of a golf course in Rochester, Minnesota, had a 126% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. And why does living near a golf course lead to Parkinson's disease? Because golf courses use about 5 times as much pesticide per acre than do farms, for example. And 2 of the pesticides that are most commonly used on golf courses, one's called chlorpyrifos, which the EPA actually banned in 2021 because it's estimated to have cost 26 million American children 17 million IQ points. But its manufacturer successfully sued to overturn that ban, allowing that pesticide to be sprayed on golf courses depending on the state. And the other one is one that Sarah just mentioned, 2,4-D. Some of you might be familiar with 2,4-D because this is a component of Agent Orange, which was sprayed obviously in Vietnam, and veterans from Vietnam who were exposed to Agent Orange have a higher rate of Parkinson's disease. So why doesn't everyone who's exposed to a chemical get the disease? Because short answer is because we have great bodies. Only a minority of people exposed to any chemical get the disease. For example, only about 10% of smokers get lung cancer. Only about 5% of people who work with asbestos get mesothelioma. So there have to be other factors. I think those factors are some of which Sarah touched on. What's the dose of the exposure? What's the duration? What's the route? For Parkinson's, I get really concerned about inhaling chemicals. The nose might be the front door to your brain. And what's the timing of the exposure? Like Sarah, I get really worried that the seeds of these diseases are planted early, whether that's childhood leukemia or childhood autism, or adult onset diseases like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Then there are some interactions with other chemicals, genetic differences. Sarah and I might differ in how fast we break down a pesticide. She might be really efficient at breaking it down. I might be slower at it, and therefore more susceptible to its adverse effects. Chance is likely there. And then there are modifiers, age, stress, other comorbidities, diabetes, other medical conditions that might be playing a role.
That's that. So I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit, Sarah, because how do you respond to the argument that, there is not actually an increase in these diseases? It's just better detection and diagnosis. That's a common response.
Yeah, is this on? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we hear that a lot, particularly with autism spectrum disorder, is one particular area where people will argue. And it is true that we've gotten better at detecting, and that diagnostic criteria have changed. However, when you look at the severe ends of the spectrum, we do see an increase in, so this is not just like more cases that we're picking up that are mild, there are more severe cases. And then I would say also that doesn't apply to aggressive forms of breast cancer, for example. So we're seeing more early onset and colon cancers as well, many cancers, but for breast cancer, for example, when we're seeing these very aggressive, earlier onset, premenopausal breast cancers, that's not increased diagnostics. We're not picking up like more early stage cancers. So I would say that the data doesn't support. I would meet that comment with the data that just does not actually bear out to support that.
And did you have something? So Carl, in terms of how the chemicals are coming out of our properties, the secondary effects that they're entering the food chain, and you mentioned rat poisons, but what else are they? Where else are they going out and then coming back to us as food or in the air? Or?
Yes, they are. They're going out and coming back to us in our food and in the air. Yeah. We have some terrible recent problems with water quality right around here, and a lot of that stuff is tied to pesticides and fertilizers, especially the harmful algal blooms, especially fertilizers, and our septic systems. But I fish a lot, and I've always been a little bit more aware than maybe people who don't eat as much fish as I do of the things that are in fish, that I hear warnings all the time, and it's been the case for my entire life. PCBs and mercury especially, but DDT and its breakdown products, more of that formerly before DDT was generally banned. But these things get into our food. People who hunt deer, the deer are eating they're eating the vegetation. Like, we don't like them eating the stuff in our backyard. Well, if our backyard is full of poison, the deer are full of poison, and people eat venison. Those deer are not exactly what you would call organic. In fact, oddly enough, you cannot label wild fish organic because of the amount of pesticides that they test positive for. And I remember learning that when I was working a lot on fisheries policy, and we were talking about, farmed versus wild, and should you not eat meat? Should you eat more fish? And I was really surprised to learn that wild fish, the things that are out in the world, cannot be certified organic because they have too many chemicals from human beings in them.
Oh my. And so much of this is coming off of our lands. And so I've been reading about fertilizers lately, and how actually even organic ones, the high levels of nitrogen are bad for children. And I mean, the synthetic ones contain PFAS and microplastics, but even high levels of organic fertilizers are nitrogen, and nitrogen has negative effects.
Yeah, I think that's true. To your point, all of the things that you just mentioned about fertilizers and that you mentioned about fertilizers in terms of water quality are really important. I know that in my own community, I struggle a lot with the landscaping that goes on in my neighborhood on the adjacent properties. And my neighbors and their landscaping companies always say, it's just fertilizer. And I'm like, nothing is just fertilizer, and often there are pre-emergent herbicides that may be mixed in with the fertilizer that they're applying. And I think there's a real lack of awareness around that even my own neighbors are convinced by their landscaping company that it's okay. And I also live in a coastal community, that it's okay, it's just fertilizer. So I think there needs to be a big re-education around that.
And we've all been hearing, of course, about the flesh-eating bacteria, which might be a bit of hype, but it does get your attention.
It's not, there are flesh-eating bacteria. That's not a made-up thing. And where they exist, it's usually because too much nitrogen has gotten into the water that sparks these various harmful algal blooms. So, they're not everywhere. They're not in every water body. There are maps of the places that have different kinds of harmful algal blooms, but they are real, unfortunately.
And a certain portion of it is from fertilizers. So,
well, I would say, without any question in my mind, the majority of that problem is from fertilizer runoff. Oh. And septic systems.
And septic systems,
those two things.
Yeah. So, Sarah, I think this is one that you might know, that landscape chemicals break down in the sun, right? So that's why they can put a sign out that says 24 to 48 hours, which is arbitrary at best, but nevertheless. But they get on your clothes, and they come in the house, and they're not in the sun anymore. And then what happens?
They stay in your home, they accumulate in dust. That's why one of the tips that we give that can generally reduce your exposure to many chemicals that come from our consumer products, as well as pesticides that come indoors, is to clean up dust, wet mop, or use wet wipes to clean up dust as much as you can. But yeah, that's true, and that is such a frustrating misconception about pesticide chemicals, is that they break down in 24 hours or 48 hours. Most of these common chemicals that are being applied to our lawns have much longer half-lives than that. And that breakdown is dependent on UV light, it's dependent on weather conditions, and often, glyphosate has been found in the soil hundreds of days after application. So to say that it's okay to go back on your lawn in 24 hours is incorrect, and you're also correct that once those chemicals come into your home through drift or by tracking them indoors, they're going to stay there much longer than they would if they were outdoors.
I just want to add one little thing to the idea that they break down in 24 hours. Even if they totally did, killing bugs is starving birds. When you kill bugs, you're starving the birds around your property. So I think we should all really understand that is a very direct link.
And think about the amount that a caterpillar eats of a leaf, and they nibble around the edges, and then compare that to an arborist who takes an entire branch full of leaves off with a chainsaw. Like, there's a disconnect there, isn't there? And so, anyway, so Ray, as I understand it, you have now been testing people for their chemical
Can I
content.
just say one thing about what you said about the
Sure.
leaves?
Yeah.
So we don't use any pesticides or fertilizer, and we have zero problem with caterpillars and leaves. Like, you can look at all the leaves in our trees and bushes, and you would be hard-pressed to see anything being eaten because we have lots of birds eating all those caterpillars.
And they need them to raise their young. And there's about the 10-step program that take 10 steps back and you won't see the problem anymore, because generally it's just tiny little nibbles. And so, Ray, just because in terms of like, how can we get people to pay attention? They are poisoning their properties, and while they're eating organic vegetables, they want to live forever, but there is this whole gap in their consciousness about striving for a landscape that is basically frozen in its tracks and being pushed to create a look that is essentially not alive. And so, as we discussed, there is this potential for fear tactics that you can test people for their chemical content.
So if you just step back, one of the principles of Western medicine is that diseases have causes. Diseases have causes. So if you're diagnosed with anything from a sprained ankle to Alzheimer's disease, you should ask your doctor, why did I get this disease? You might have turned your ankle playing soccer. If they can't answer why you got Alzheimer's disease, then ask yourself, how are we going to cure a disease if we don't know what its cause is? How am I going to prevent my children and grandchildren, my spouses, my siblings from getting the same disease if we don't know what its cause is? How are we going to develop highly effective treatments for this disease if we don't know what its cause is? So I've spent the last 10 years looking at the environmental causes of Parkinson's, because I came to the realization that this is not natural. It's unnatural for a disease to go from affecting 6 people in London to 6 million. You put a mouse in the laboratory and you let it age, it will never spontaneously develop Parkinson's disease. It will never spontaneously develop Alzheimer's disease. The only way it develops these diseases is if you manipulate its genes or expose it to toxic chemicals. So why aren't we measuring these chemicals in people's bodies? Why, if you're diagnosed with cancer, why aren't we measuring known cancer-causing chemicals in people's bodies? Why am I, as a neurologist, when I see someone with Parkinson's, not measuring pesticides that are linked to the disease in their bodies? Why am I not measuring dry cleaning chemicals that are in their bodies? And this bothered me, so much it bothered me that 2 or 3 months ago I started doing this. Nothing breakthrough yet, because for Parkinson's, the exposure might have happened and likely happened 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, and so those chemicals might be out of their blood or urine, but they still might be hiding in their fat. Sarah just briefly alluded to this. They could still be in breast milk of nursing women, for example, because they are fat-loving. And when we measure these chemicals, we change the course of diseases. So I grew up in the 1970s. Anyone who grew up in the 1970s, 95% of us had unsafe levels of lead in our blood. 95% of us did. Because of that, we took action. We got rid of lead in paint, lead in gasoline. And if you look at the graph in terms of lead in gasoline and lead levels in children, they go down together. Today, children have 95% lower levels of lead than when I was a child. So if your children, your grandchildren seem smarter than you, that's because they are. It's estimated because if we got rid of lead in gasoline and paint, that children today are 3 to 4 have IQ points, 3 to 4 higher IQ points than we did in the 1970s. Now, we might be giving away some of that because we're putting pesticides into their cereals, but if we take action and start measuring these chemicals in our bodies, I think we can prevent people from ever getting the disease. I think we can find out why people are getting the disease. I think we can come up with far more effective treatments, and I think we can come up with those effective treatments faster.
Thank you.
Can
That's
I
great.
add? Can I just add on to that?
Sure.
Two things. One is that even to take a simpler approach, one of the things that I think needs to be happening in the clinic and something that we're trying to do at Mount Sinai is to do environmental health screening. So how often does your physician ask you what do, ask you about the surroundings of your home, ask you whether you're using pesticides at home, right? So we need to get those conversations between doctors and patients. But then I would also say in a lot of cases, like right now, starting here today, you don't need to measure what's in your body. We know enough about avoiding certain chemicals. I'm not saying don't measure. I agree with everything that Ray said. But just to say that you can start today by not using pesticides on your property, but for looking for all of the places where you can avoid exposures to pesticides and other chemicals where I think we have a strong enough weight of evidence to say we should not be putting these in consumer products. We should not be exposed to them. So, on the flip side, it's like, let's not wait longer for more and more data because we have enough data on a lot of these exposures.
And we also know that why are we killing insects in our ornamental, our recreational and relaxational landscapes? Because they have to eat. It's all about food. Eat, poop, multiply, die. It's the whole, we share that with every other life form. And so everything's got to eat. And if we do not let the rest of the non-human world eat our landscapes, we've taken over every available square inch. What are they going to eat? You're not eating your landscape. Why can't they? So it's a lovely sharing moment. So it's time for you to write your questions down, and we'll give you a sec before we pick them up in case you haven't written them yet. And while that's happening, I'd love for each of you to tell me if there's one thing that you could ask everybody to do that you think that would be the most important thing they could do. So, Carl, what would that be?
Well, I mean, I guess there are two things. I'm going to cheat. So one thing is that I want to live in a place where my sign is like, you're welcome to live here with us, not an oppressive place where I'm trying to kill almost everything that is trying to maintain its existence in the world. Everything is welcome to live where I live, and it makes things a lot easier. It makes things a lot nicer. It makes things a lot more alive. It's just generally more pleasant. It happens to also be more healthy and safer. But the second thing is that almost all of these problems are still problems because of political policies, and political policies that are driven by the companies that profit off of our health. We're called consumers. We're not referred to as citizens because consuming is their use for us. Our former congressman is the head of the EPA right now. There's an article about him in the New Yorker this week. The title is Burning Man. He's just destroying the EPA. Why is he destroying the EPA? Well, because when Donald Trump was running, he said during one of the debates, quote, "I will destroy the EPA." And people voted for him, and he's doing that with the help of our former congressman. So all of these things really boil down to political policy. That's why we still have these problems, and that's the only way we can address them. The DDT ban, all that kind of stuff, didn't happen by accident. It happened because a few very persistent people really kept at it, and there was an organized effort to make some improvements. when we came of age in the 1970s, people were a lot more concerned. The first Earth Day in 1970, 1/5 of everybody in the United States went to an Earth Day event. If you look at the New York Times front page the day after Earth Day 1970, you can go look it up. The streets are thronged with people, hundreds of thousands of people thronging the streets. It was, in a way, a protest against poison. That's mainly what Earth Day was, a protest against poison and pollution. And all of that success has been slowly chipped away and slowly eroded and is now being totally routed. Everything that I care about is in hard reverse right now. The three things I've cared about my whole life, civil rights, women's rights, and the environment, are all in hard reverse right now, and that is a purely political situation.
Thank you, Carl.
I'll give you a little more time, Sarah. So I opened by talking about Charlotte Haley, who wrote in 1991, the National Cancer Institute annual budget is $1.8 billion. Only 5% goes for cancer prevention. Help us wake up legislators in America by wearing this ribbon. So Charlotte Haley was a mother, a grandmother, and actually a great-grandmother when she died at age 91. And 35 years later, I think we see mothers across this country increasingly concerned about the indiscriminate use of pesticides. Pesticides, as we mentioned, many are aimed at damaging the nervous system of insects. And we wonder why 1 in 31 8-year-old children have autism. We wonder why ALS is common among soccer players and increasingly common among young women. We wonder why Parkinson's is the world's fastest growing brain disease. We wonder why 1 in 3 of us who aspire to live to 85 will develop Alzheimer's disease. Diseases have causes, and I think we should heed the words of Susan Sontag, who says we should be serious, we should be passionate, and we should wake up.
Okay, I don't think I have anything as eloquent to say in terms of my one thing that I would say, but I think I would kind of build off of what Carl said, which is kind of don't buy into it, don't buy it. We have to stop consuming so much. Don't buy into the need for all of these products on your lawn and on your property, and don't buy into the need for this endless consumption, because my second thing that I would want to talk about today, if I could, is plastics and the petrochemical industry, which is a whole other conversation, but actually related to pesticides, which are petroleum-based products. But as we're consuming more and more, we're putting money into the hands of corporations that are turning around to use it to lobby against policies that would protect our health and protect the planet. And so that's just, I think we just need to step back and stop consuming. So that's my final word, I guess.
Okay. So, thank you. This is great. So actually, there's a few questions here about land care. And so I guess I'm going to lead with that. Because like one person is asking, what do you use instead of fertilizer? And what are the products that are safe? And who's doing safe work? So one of the things that is key to the whole transition from the world of noise and poison is it's about the process, not the products. So actually, you don't need to buy any fertilizer. You don't really need to put anything on your lawn. If you care for the plants in your lawn and you care for the soil that supports those plants, they will be fine. So there's 2 things that are key to creating a healthy lawn. One is, of course, the plants have to have something to eat. What do all plants eat before humans came along? They kind of ate themselves, which is that the trees drop their leaves, and the soil and all of the organic matter that a landscape produces goes back into the ground. It's the best that they could get. It's the food they made for themselves. So when you mow your lawn, mulch mow if you can, put a mulching blade on your mower, buy a mulching mower, and leave the clippings to go back into the lawn. No, it will not cause thatch, because thatch is a result of a lawn that is pickled. The grass clippings are not breaking down because the lawn's been treated with fungicides and that have killed the capacity of the lawn to decompose. The other thing is clover. Clover is a nitrogen fixer. Allow clover in your lawn. You will have an automatic source of nitrogen that will not run into your adjacent waterways. It'll stay in the soil. So it's really about building soils that are healthy and happy. Fungicides, everybody knows about the Wood Wide Web and the amazing fungal network and the mother tree and all of that. That's all based on a fungal network. The moment you put a fungicide on your property, that be gone. That you've destroyed that amazing network that is there to keep your plants healthy and happy and help them protect themselves. It's their immune system. So you don't really need any products. You don't need to bring anything in. We propose that you close the loop on your property. All biomass that a property creates, find a way to put it back in the ground. Ask us. We have all kinds of ideas on that subject. But then buy nothing. Do not send anything to the landfill, and don't buy anything back. So,
and purely theologically, God called them leaves because he wanted you to leave them.
and exactly. And if you don't know what to do with them, check our website, check our newsletters, actually, because periodically I open my garden, and my garden is a bit of a hodgepodge of ideas. And so it's all the different things that you might like to try to deal with your leaves. I have a lot of them, we all do. I do not recommend chopping up all your leaves, because leaves are the home, like a lot of things live on leaves. There's a word that I learned recently and immediately forgot, for the life of a leaf, all the lives, it's a whole biome. So once you go in there and chop it all up, you are disrupting the cycle of all of the things that fell out of the tree on that leaf, planned to do another part of their life cycle on that leaf on the ground, and then go back up into the tree afterwards. So try to protect that system if you can. Is there a product that is not poisonous that takes away invasive weeds in the grass? Well, one of them is called your hands. You can weed them, pulling weeds. But once you get really, really healthy, oftentimes it's about creating systems that are completely dense. So if you have space between your plants, fill them with plants. They can help. If you have an intention for a garden, your intention is always going to take resource in order for it to persist, because nature has her own intention for every place. And it might not coincide with yours. So yeah, there's some effort that's going to be needed. But getting down there, in there, and doing the weeding, it's like how you raise your kids. Like, you got to know them. So, so what about state and local bans on chemicals? And I'm not even sure there's a solution, because now our government, in its wisdom, is not only taking it, originally it took it away from the communities, so we could not make our own choices in our communities about which chemicals to ban, and it put it at the state level, and now they want to take it from the state level to the federal level. So the best thing to say about that is, please write your congressman, and please vote. If you're here in District 1, please try to change our congressman. I don't know the political message is appropriate right now, but.
There are tons of things that people can do. So I found in the course writing our book that pesticides are routinely sprayed on kids' schools and playgrounds. Pesticides are routinely sprayed on kids' schools and playgrounds. Kids don't mind weeds, kids play with weeds. So contact your school and ask them, are you using pesticides on your kids' schools and playgrounds? And can you please stop? In California, Robina Sewell dropped off her 6-year-old son at Sherman Oaks Elementary School. He went outside and manned the hazmat suit to spraying the hedges. Her son has an asthma attack in front of her. He goes back to her and goes, Mommy, Mommy, is this ever going to happen again? And she said no. Because she said no, California eventually passes the Healthy Schools Act, which bans the use of most toxic pesticides on kids' schools and playgrounds, and requires that schools that do use pesticides notify parents in writing in advance of such use. This is all within our control. You don't even need very much in terms of politicians to do that. Communities, including here in East Hampton, can decide to spray less pesticides. They can decide not to spray pesticides on hedges. They can decide not to spray pesticides or most toxic pesticides on their golf courses. My wife and I recently moved from Rochester, New York, the other end of the state, and a suburban town, Henrietta, the town supervisor said, I haven't signed a purchase order for pesticides this year. This is all within our control.
Fantastic. So, yeah, so a lot of great questions here. Sorry, I'm sort of lost in the question thing here. So a few people have asked, maybe Carl, you have some thoughts on this, about their dogs. How do you keep ticks from coming into the house on your dog?
You would have to not have a dog, I think, to keep ticks from coming into the house on your dog. We have, what do we use? I can't remember the name of the pills we're now using for the dogs, where the ticks die when they bite the dogs. But live ticks do come in the house on the dogs. I don't know how to stop that completely from happening, I'm sorry to say.
You can.
Yeah, I don't know. There was one particularly horrendous spring about 10 years ago where one of my dogs came in and shook, and there were 24 ticks on the carpet. That's not a great place to end this answer. No, I don't have a good answer for how you can prevent the ticks from coming in on the dogs. Ticks do come in on dogs. We have 2 dogs. It is a bit of a problem. It's not a huge problem, but it's enough of a problem that it's a problem.
I use the poison pill too, and I don't love the idea that I use the poison pill, but it's a compromise at best. But I would urge everybody not to use tick collars, because that is a neonic, and neonics are, Sarah, you can talk about neonics and systemics.
I mean, I think that they were on one of the slides that I showed, just to say that, you know, there are a newer generation of insecticide, pesticide, commonly applied in lawns and gardens, but also associated with things like neurotoxicity, immune system dysfunction, other human health impacts, and also highly toxic to pollinators. So that's been a main reason why they've sort of fallen into the radar and restricted in New York State now as well. On the dog, I also have a dog. You know, it doesn't work for everyone. We have identified places where we take him and it's horribly infested with ticks, and we just keep him out of those areas when we can. And then also have a tick comb, and so I don't know, it's like a practical, difficult thing, but to try to, before he comes into the house, comb some of that out. But.
All right, okay. Those are two really good answers, and I guess one of the ways we cut down on it is we try to keep the dogs on the beach during the tick months, and we walk them on the beach in the tick months, and in the winter we walk in the woods with them.
That's really good. So lots of great questions here, but we're sort of running out of time. So come up and ask me, because one question I thought that was really interesting is, why aren't there any workers or contractors on this panel? And, well, because this is specifically about pesticides, but if you know a worker or a contractor who would like to join us, please encourage them to come. We advertise, we ask, we look. It's really hard to get them in the room, but we have one here, hooray. Jason, thank you very much. But rare breed, I have to say, and this is something that we're working on. We're working, Perfect Earth is here to help you. We don't want anybody getting fired. So if you have a landscaper who is not doing this, let's talk to your landscaper about changing their practices, because they are exposed as well. And we don't have enough people to go around, and it's really not about selling sprays, so it is a bit of an economic change that they need to make, but it doesn't negatively affect their income. It does not have to, because you transfer out the pay and the spray for actually showing up with some information that is useful and helpful. You all love your farmer, right? Do you love your landscaper? So let's get them all on board. We have a school for that, and so check with us. So we're now going to go outside, and where you can get your books signed, get your books signed, have some organic treats, of course, and also, before you go, just wanted to let you know Perfect Youth has more grounded conversations coming up soon. Our next one will be at Longhouse, and it's called What Remains. It's all about, it's a trade fair, actually, for all the companies that can help you consciously, carefully, conscientiously return your body to the earth. And everybody's really curious about it. Like, what are all the new ways that you can go back to the earth without poisoning it? So,
Can I just say
Carl?
one thing? I guess we're going to go outside, and there are some books outside.
Mm-hmm.
Laura in the lobby also has books, and she has a special 2-for-1 with my titles. It's buy
Great.
one, get one free.
And
for
you
my
will
titles.
sign them, right?
Of
if
course.
asked?
Yes.
Great.
As long as I'm on this side of going back into the earth, I will sign the books.
Yes. And in August, date to be announced, we're going to do one on ticks, specifically on ticks, because ticks have a way of just like taking over every conversation. And I thought, okay, let's just try to push the tick thing into one entire conversation and hash it out with the fear, the joys, the anguish, the whole thing. And at our Perfect Earth table, meet Tim Wheeler, who is our Living Lands Director, where you can sign up for a free visit. We come to your property for free for an hour. He will give you wonderful ideas about how you can do a better, or maybe you're doing great, a more ecological opportunities in your land care. Thank you.